I wish I could take credit and say that I had planned it so that we would have the distinguished speaker who gave the official opening address when the Ombudsman's office first opened 10 years ago. I had planned it so that we would have him here 10 years later. I'm afraid I can't take credit for that. It's happened, but not through any planning of mine. I certainly had heard wonderful things about all of the assistance that Dr. Ayeni had provided to my predecessor, Ms. Arlene Brock. And I was anxious to have him come and speak to me and my team about how we could continue to be relevant and effective service providers and work in tandem with our stakeholders. I did not appreciate that it was 10 years ago to the month that he had been here. But we are certainly pleased to have him here this evening, and I can tell you that he has been putting us through our paces over the last few days over at the Ombudsman's office. Hopefully all my team will stay awake because he's been working us all day and then giving us homework. It's been a long time since I've had to account for homework. All right, so formally I should introduce now our distinguished speaker. Dr. Victor Ayeni is the Director of Governance and Management Services International, a UK-based training and consultancy firm dedicated to advancing the quality of public sector governance in developing countries and transitional democracies. He has over 35 years of experience in governance and international development, spanning some 50 countries in Africa, Asia, the Caribbean, North America, and the Pacific. Dr. Ayeni has previously served as Director of Governance and Institutional Development of the Commonwealth Secretariat, London, and before that, Deputy Director and Lead Advisor in Governance and Public Management. Prior to joining the Commonwealth, Professor Ayeni lectured in universities in South Africa, Botswana, and Nigeria. He also worked briefly in the Ondo State Civil Service of Nigeria. Did I pronounce that correctly? He has served as consultant to several departments, as well as numerous international and bilateral development agencies. Professor Ayeni holds a PhD in public administration. He is an accomplished international development and public sector management scholar and practitioner. He is a renowned and respected international authority on the Ombudsman and related oversight institutions. His pioneering work helped position the Commonwealth Secretariat as a leading technical player in this area. He is a widely published author, so he would be very comfortable in this setting, in the library. He is a widely published author with 15 books and over 160 papers on various aspects of governance and public development management to his credit. He has been a member of the editorial advisory board of the International Ombudsman Journal, based in Alberta, Canada, and until recently was the editor of the African Journal of Public Administration and Management. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you. Listen attentively to our speaker, Dr. Victor Ayeni.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Ombudsman, the Chief Justice, Ms. Arlene Brock, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, back to London. So, I want to start by, again, expressing my gratitude. It just happened that it's almost exactly 10 years from the day that we were here. You know, I think it was on the 16th. Yes, 16th and 19th. Okay, yes. Well, it's 3 days different, so you know. So I think it was. So today is 21. Yeah. So yeah, it's almost, and it was just a coincidence because at that time when we were discussing about coming here, we didn't even think about it. It was when I started doing this that it occurred to me that this was almost exactly 10 years ago. Things have happened since 10 years ago, and then of course, one of the most conspicuous part of that is that I have become older. I didn't realize I'm much older because I looked at the photograph that we took on those days, and I couldn't believe it was me. But that's life. So 10 years on, the Ombudsman in this country has grown to be an extremely important constitutional body. And I want to, and it's not because Alan Brock is here, but I think it's appropriate for me to be able to make the point that Ms. Brock has, sorry, what, the battery is low? Look like the battery is low. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, it's not connected. It says 6. So, over the last 10 years, the Ombudsman of Botswana has indeed, and I say that with a lot of humility, grown to be one of the most most respected institutions in the Commonwealth. And certainly, if you're going to take the 3 leading institutions in Commonwealth, small state, Bermuda will probably be the number 1 or number 2. And I think that accomplishment is something that you all can be extremely proud of. Of course, Ayeni and her team did quite a lot of work in making that to happen, but no institution survived and become a big thing if the country and society doesn't support it. So I think it's some credit that you all deserve. But it's also a credit that all of us who have been associated with this office feels extremely proud of, and we feel so delighted that we all can speak about all those things that have been achieved. I will not bore you about all the achievements, but part of what includes the fact that Bermuda has, in so many ways, come up to play a lot of leadership role in various Commonwealth networks. You provide advice for other countries. You have, in fact, been helping other countries to start off, and your officials continue to support other ombudsman offices, not only here in North Africa, North America and the Caribbean, but indeed in Africa and in other parts of the world. So I want to start off by congratulating Bermuda for that achievement. But having said that, I also congratulate you for the transition from the foundation to, of course, the current ombudsman. And having been with her over the last 1 week or so, I can confidently say that Bermuda clearly has also recognized the need to take this office into a new direction. I'm proud to be able to speak to the vision and direction I see with the current ombudsman, and I have no doubt in my mind that this is truly the direction that a well-respected institution like this should be going. Having said that, so how do I feel I should contribute to what you are doing? I just thought that the best thing to do in this discussion would be to essentially come back to something that I think I have picked up in some of the few things I've been reading recently, and of course use that opportunity to contribute to what I think is a very important part of what should be happening next, which is the whole effort to continue to educate and enlighten critical players of the important role that this institution plays, not only in Bermuda, but indeed in any contemporary society. The Ombudsman institution is now widely established as a key governance instrument with which the contemporary state addresses particular issues faced in the effort to create a good society. And it's so much so that today we really cannot talk of a functioning democracy without an ombudsman. And I think I was speaking to some of my to the colleagues this week, and I told them about some work we were doing in Africa, where the Chinese, who don't have an ombudsman, insisted that they wanted to see an ombudsman before they could do business. So that tells you, how this institution has become very, very important. And it is important for many reasons. Bermuda is one of about 144 countries around the world today that have established this institution at governmental level. And that's what you have in Bermuda, because you have what we call a public sector ombudsman, which is an ombudsman set up at national level and essentially overseeing the rest of the country. We know that there are about 1,000 individual offices around the world, and all these offices take various forms. They are in various domestic legislative jurisdictions, including national offices. We have what we call specialized ombudsman bodies. We have subnational bodies that we have in America and in Canada. We have a number of non-state offices as well, environment ombudsman in some countries. And this week also we shared a bit of the list of the various ombudsman offices we now have. We have football, we have ombudsman for properties, we have a funeral ombudsman in the United Kingdom, we have a housing ombudsman in the United Kingdom. You can name it. We literally have ombudsman for every aspect of our life today. It's become an extremely popular institution with business and corporate sector, and indeed, in all developed countries, and this perhaps might be one area that we will need to talk about, the ombudsman has become a very, very important instrument for driving the market competition and protecting consumers and clients in business and the corporate sector. International institutions have also established it. The EU, the WTO, the World Bank, the United Nations, they all have ombudsmen, and of course also, a number of the regional institutions also have established the institution. We know that since about 2000, that is the beginning of this millennium, there have been not less than 60 new institutions, and I think my calculation of it is that about 5 new offices have been established in countries almost every year. So that is quite a phenomenal development, and it is in that background that I felt that as the Bermuda Ombudsman marks 10 years of its official opening, I want to ask you to explore with me some discussion about the Ombudsman and our everyday life. And I would quickly speak to that. In doing this, I want to try and address 3 main questions. One, why does the Ombudsman remain the institution that is what I call an institution of choice for any government or establishment around the world today? Anytime government talk about protecting consumers, protecting citizens, their institution of choice is the Ombudsman. Why is that? Is that still so? What particular lessons can we learn from the experience and the contribution of Bermuda, which obviously I said have emerged to be an extremely successful experience, and what of course can this country learn from the experience elsewhere? I do think that will then enable us to think about what kind of advice we want to give to Ms. Spearman as she takes this institution forward over the next 10 years. So that's briefly what I'm hoping to speak about. So why did I choose this focus? I'm reminded by, I collect African idiomatic expressions, and I will share a few of them with you. It's the only hobby I have. I can't play football, I can't run around. I spend my time collecting them. And I picked this the other day. When the baby grows, the crying changes. And the idea, of course, is very obvious. If the baby is small, it makes some noise. When it starts growing up, it starts making different type of noise. And I think your ombudsman has reached a stage that it made such a noise, it now needs to make different sets of noise. And I think it's in that regard that I thought we could talk about it. And this is because in our focus on the big governance issues of the day, we easily lose sight of the fact that this institution is essentially about ordinary people. People, like you and I, who live, our daily life and what we do. This concerns, seems to me to be the most critical issue when I look at some of the development in this country in recent times. And I think as we mark these 10 years, it probably makes sense to just come back and reinforce that point. How do I intend to do that? And I thought I should start off by the speech that was made by the Premier, the then Premier Alex Scott, at the opening in 2006. He said something as follows: "We view the Ombudsman as a cornerstone in the great structure that is good governance. By investigating complaints to determine whether the government is doing things in a fair and proper way, and by learning from what went wrong and translating recommendations into action, the Ombudsman not only improving governance, but you are also improving people's everyday experience with government. The Ombudsman will address not only those issues of national importance, but issues related to everyday matters that are significant to the members of the community." And it just looked to me that when we get so covered up with all the big things that happen, we forget that ultimately this is what we are talking about. You and I really do care about what happens to ordinary life, because, you know, we are part of them. They are our neighbors, they are our friends. But what I find particularly, you know, intriguing about it is the fact that it enables us to make reference to something we call Ubuntu. And I'm sure Aline has heard about Ubuntu. This is something that the South Africans really actually have to. Huh? You've heard about it. Yes, I thought as much. The moment I saw you, I knew that you were familiar with Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a philosophy about our common humanity. It's the fact that, you know, we are all rooted in the fact that I am a person because you are also a human being. And that when you think about it, we can only call ourselves human beings when people who surround us behave and live like human beings. And to that extent, anything that fosters that becomes very, very important to our life. And I think this institution in many ways help us to realize that at the end of the day, what we are trying to achieve here is an institution which in many ways enables us to live as human beings, enables you and I to be able to respect the fact that people who surround us also have to be like us. Of course, it is also for this reason that, you know, and Aline is very much familiar with this argument of mine, that the Ombudsman itself has become a human rights issue. We no longer talk about it as just an institution that should be established. Increasingly, we now accept that for the protection of our rights, it's inevitable that government set up this institution. It is also for that reason that I think we all have a collective responsibility in ensuring that this institution serves us and serve us well. So where we have concern about all of us doing that, obviously, I think that is something that should bother us. And that is why I felt that this was what was discussing today. True, there are many other institutions that look like the Ombudsman, and there is no doubt in the fact that so many things, and we talked about some of them this week, they do some similar things. But what is unique about this institution is that it does certain things in a very, very distinct way. And that distinctiveness is not in any way replicated by any other institution. I want to just share some of that with you. Some of what it does is that it helps us to respond to our own prevailing expectations of the day, what you and I want to see in our society, and what you and I want to see as human beings. And it includes things like that, like the following. One, it helps us foster a government that is democratically organized within a democratic culture, and which is supported by efficient administrative organizations that respect our rights and of course also recognize the economic sphere in which we all have to operate. And this is why, as I said to you, increasingly it has become an institution which the private sector also now find extremely useful. It helps us to facilitate good and effective institutions by giving advice, by helping us to monitor what goes on there. It enables us to ensure that the institutions that provide things around us, our civil services, our schools, our hospitals, they function well. And to that extent, help us to create a good society. In the United Kingdom, the Ombudsman we have the Ombudsman covering the National Health Service, And that's actually a very, very big part of what it does in the UK. The Ombudsman also ensures that government is accountable and that you and I can identify and recognize that that government belongs to us. If you think about it, the reason why you and I feel happy at the end of the day is when you feel comfortable that your government is responsive to your needs and responsive to your concerns. The Ombudsman contributes to promoting a public administration that works for the people most of the time. And the way it does that is quite intriguing, and we will say a little bit about that. But what essentially it ensures is that it's not so much to harass public administration, it just basically work with them in trying to ensure that at the end of the day, what is regarded as important to needs of ordinary people are fully taken account of. The flip side of that, of course, is that because it does all of these things, it also helps us, and that's why I use the word undermine. It helps us to counteract poor quality governance. This is why increasingly too, in not so developed countries, the Ombudsman has become an extremely popular institution. Because in many ways, by having it, it then enables you to begin to lift up the quality of other institutions that you have. It can highlight issues of incompetence, address focus on problems of corruption. It, of course, enables us to deal with issues of accountability. It facilitates openness, and, of course, it ensures that at the end of the day, that we all respect the rule of law. By doing all of this, it contributes to creating a healthy, a secure, and happy population. And this is an interesting argument, which, of course, you guys in Bermuda will probably are not likely to ever experience. But what we do know is that some of the big wars, even in Africa, started off with very small complaints. People who are unhappy with little things, and Sierra is a particularly intriguing one. I know that the Chief Justice probably will be familiar with that, where it was little things over time that simply grew up to become things that eventually led to people going into the jungle and then starting a war, and of course ending up in the killing of so many millions of people. And that is repeated in, even in Zaire and in Congo. Of course, a lot of that is fueled by, the corruption of government and the fact that nobody seems to be talking about it. So in many ways, by doing all of these things, it ultimately does what I said earlier on, is the essence of Ubuntu, the idea that you are human because I am human. An enemy defeated by truth will never return, but an enemy defeated by weapon is certain to return. The key about the Ombudsman is that he doesn't fight with weapons, he fights with the truth. And by focusing on the truth, it fulfills this fundamental principle of human existence. Of course, as I indicated, the benefit of this institution is not limited to public administration. And I just wanted to provide some quick insight from the business sector. I picked this up just as I was doing it, and I thought it would be of interest. There's some work that have been done, basically based on United Kingdom, and it says, this is the summary of it. We know that for every customer that bothers to complain, 26 others will never do. So if the Ombudsman receives one complaint, there are at least 26 other people out there who have just decided to work in it. And the flip side of that is that for only 4% of those who are aggrieved actually complain. About 96% never do. Just think about it. I'm sure you've had experiences similar to that, where you were extremely upset with something and you wanted to do something about it, but when you got home, somebody talked you out of it and said, it's not worth your effort. And you just said, okay, look, I'll go and pray about it, and God will deal with the problem. And many of us end up with that, and we never do something about it. The study also showed that half of the population, British population, said that they would rather take their business elsewhere. And I want you to mark this. They would rather take their business elsewhere than to complain. That means that where you have choice, half of those who are upset will simply take their business elsewhere. What happens when they don't have choice? They stop with it. And that's what creates the unhappiness that this institution help us to deal with. That study also said that half of the population, of course, never complain because it involves too much trouble. Either they have to write letter, or they have to go somewhere, or they have to do something, and they choose to live with it. But we know also that one unhappy customer tells at least 9 other people. And the interesting side of this is that when you make one person unhappy, at least he or she makes sure that 9 other people are unhappy. So they go around saying all sorts of things about you. And I was listening to one about the other day, and I think it was one of the American pastors who was saying this, and said something like someone was driving him somewhere, and this guy said, look, don't take that road because I don't like to see the people who are there. And he said, what happened? He said something like 10 years ago, he wanted to buy a pair of shoes. He didn't get the correct pair of shoes. And since then, he stopped taking the road where that shop is. And people do get unhappy that road. So 65% of, and this is interesting, because what he then says to us is that we know that because complaining and grievance can make people so unhappy, you actually don't need to do too much if you are a business to make profit. And this is what, of course, those who are thinking about business would enjoy this. 65% of an average company's business comes, from, people who are satisfied. In other words, if you make your people happy, you're almost sure that 65% of your clientele will give you the profit that you want. Customer loyalty is higher after a complaint has been successfully resolved, which creates the most important moment of truth. The point about that, of course, is that when people become happy, it increases their commitment, makes them happier, they say nicer things about you, and of course that helps everybody at the end of the day. What I'm trying to get at, I think, is partly summarized by what Deborah Stevens has talked about. Probably the hardest job is convincing people, employed in customer service. And this, she was writing about people in customer service role, that complaining customers are a good thing. Actually, it is the customers who don't complain that you have to worry about. The ones who don't feel like expending energy to confront you or write a letter, or who are not bold enough to tell you what they are unhappy with. Be grateful for complaints. A complaining customer is doing what many companies, of course, hire consultants like us to do, and the mystery shoppers who they try to find out what the problem. The essence of this is really to underscore. Just try and relate this issue and put it in the context of government, and you can see how difficult and of course the opportunity that it also opens up for us. That when people are unhappy, we actually are bottling up a lot of frustration. In the same vein, when we deal with them, we make the population extremely happy. And I think that basically is what I'm trying to say, that at the end of the day, the demand that the Ombudsman fulfills a very, very important demand in our society in regard to the fact that it helps us to address the problems of people who are at risk, people who are potentially unhappy citizens, and who, of course, can do a whole range of things when they are frustrated. So what really is this institution anyway? Of course, most of you have seen Ms. Piano, you've seen Ms. Ayeni. You know they are two nice ladies. Is that all that makes people an ombudsman? As in Bermuda, this person is usually an independent, non-partisan official. You don't have a committee. In some other countries, they are a committee of officials. It's often provided, as in your country as well, in the Constitution. And their primary role is to supervise administration. Traditionally, this institution had dealt with complaints from public on administrative justice and maladministration, but increasingly too with human rights and corruption-related matters. And it's also because many of the things that they do also do border on those two issues. In response to complaints submitted by others or on his or her own initiative, the Ombudsman has power to investigate, to report upon, and make recommendations upon individual cases, administrative procedures, and of course on system-wide issues. And this is where they have become extremely important for the way we run our modern society. They are not judges, they are not tribunals, and they do not normally have express powers to make orders or reverse administrative action. I'm sure there might be some of you who want to speak about this, but indeed this is one of the things that make it an extremely unique institution. Because it then, because it doesn't have that, seeks to find solutions through process of investigation and by conciliation. Essentially, therefore, it is committed to a number of core features. One is to handle people's grievances, in specific areas or general areas. It has substantially focused on redressing individual wrongs, and that's primarily what it works away from. It oversights public administration. It uses what we call inquisitorial, and those who are in the legal profession will understand what I'm talking about here, because it doesn't essentially use adversarial methods which bring people to argue and fight one another. It of course has no non-binding powers. It must work with a lot of informality. It has to be a speedy institution. It must be flexible, and of course, it is accessible to the public. All of this, I must say, I'm proud to say, are features that your own institution have essentially institutionalized. And I think it is really for that I felt it might then be useful to summarize what I think are the core benefits, which for me makes it so important to what I call the life of the everyday life of ordinary people. To the extent that it is, as we have characterized it, its benefits include the following. It helps to protect individual rights, and that your right as well as my own right. It provides a speedy and expert way of dealing with problems that we might have in any way and in whatever grievances we might have, of course, in areas of jurisdiction. It helps us to stop terrible things happening before they become worse. And so by dealing with small matters, we can see through them and help us to stop them from becoming problems that can have damaging impact on our system. And as I said earlier on, this is an area that countries that, of course, don't work well like yours find this institution extremely helpful. Yeah, it is a watchdog institution. It provides oversight. It helps us, of course, to deal with problems that can enable us to reform our environment. It's an instrument for providing feedback for government. That's one of the issues that I think is perhaps we want to talk about later on. That is not just an institution that helps ordinary people. At the end of the day, it provides feedback for government. And that means that those who are in authority, those who have to govern us, can also use it as a pulse for testing how ordinary people feel about them. It's also, because of that, a chance for administrators to be heard as well, and of course to be commended whenever they do things, and usually by an unbiased and respected authority. In some others, particularly in some jurisdictions, ombudsmen now even give annual awards to civil servants. And finally, it helps us to advance a people-sensitive administrative concept. This concept, of course, is not just about issues between those who are in authority and the rest of us. It's not just issue between an official and those who are served. We all are positively impacted by the work of the Ombudsman because it touches every aspect of our life. And all those things that you and I need on a daily basis that makes us to live as human beings. And the office effort to resolve issues that affect ordinary people benefit not just those ordinary people, but as I said, in the spirit of Ubuntu, helps us to create a community that we all can be very much part of. It therefore helps us to create a world that is secure, that secures our rights and enables us to live like good human beings. So it is fair, therefore, to say that the Ombudsman is not just an institution for us, is it? It contributes to underwriting the sense of common humanity which underpins our daily living in today's societal realities. I bet there's no bald-headed person here. You know, a bald-headed man, the Congolese will say, will not grow here by just getting excited. So in going forward, I think there are a number of things we have to be clear about. The fact that Bermuda has made success does not mean that it shouldn't bother about the future. I think there are obviously a number of issues that arise from what we are saying, and I just wanted to flag a few things. I think looking at where you stand now, looking at what the institution had done, it looks to me that there are 6 primary issues that may be of concern to Ms. Spearman and of course to this community as it goes forward. One of them is not quite an issue that directly relates to this institution, but it's actually a derivation from its legislation. That is because the legislation essentially limits the use of the Ombudsman to this institution and to the jurisdiction that it covers. The implication of that is that other needs outside of that are essentially not covered in this country. And I think there is a need, in the light of what I have just said, to look at those other areas that are not currently covered and to see what can be done about that. You know, it may not be that you set up an ombudsman, but clearly there are needs for you to extend this kind of service to other sectors by either creating more functioning complaint handling institutions or certainly looking at how you can create other form of non-governmental related bodies to try and deal with the needs in those other sectors that are important here. This has become a standard practice in all developed economies, and I think Bermuda will be going in the right direction if it does that. I think, secondly, that there will be need to focus more on educating leadership and drawing their commitment to this institution. And everything I've tried to say is making the point that this is not an institution just for the people. It's actually an institution that benefits political leadership more than you can ever imagine. You know, and I think that trying to work together and trying to support this institution is important in going forward. But it's also important to focus on educating, because nobody wakes up in the morning and knows about the Ombudsman. So until you talk to people about it, they would not know about it. And the fact that I'm a political leader does not necessarily mean that I understand what this institution is all about. So I think some more work needs to be done in that area, because you do need that backup to be able to make your institution even more successful. I think there is an increasing need for this office, of course, to become more multifunctional, because increasingly that's what they do. And I think there are quite a number of challenging issues in terms of extending that mandate. In the first 10 years, it's fine, but as you move forward, it has to be an institution that is more versatile than it currently is. So that leads us ultimately to public education. The need for continuing public education remains very, very important. We're fortunate, this is a very literate society. It's not too difficult, but we know from all the experience of even literate society that a lot of work, a lot of continuous work needs to be done to keep people alive of what this institution is all about. Some few years ago, some few years now, I must say, there were some studies in the United Kingdom to determine how much people knew about the Ombudsman. And it was interesting that a fair number of people said things like they thought the Ombudsman was a masquerade. And I don't think that if you did a similar study here, you will not find people who think the Ombudsman is probably not just Ms. Spearman, but some kind of, either something that probably is peculiar to this society. I think, fifthly, is the need for the Ombudsman to enhance collaboration. These institutions strive by working with others, and I think there will be need to pay more attention to doing that and to trying to build that collaborative relation. And underpinning all of that is looking at how you continue to build the capacity of this office so that it can continuously improve. Because the whole essence of the developed institution is its ability to continuously improve. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to go fast, you can go alone. If you want to go far, we all have to go together. All I can urge you at this point is that you have made good success of this institution. You all need to go together as we go into the future. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for listening, and I hope I've made